So this is our third annual Addressing Racism in Construction webinar. Year 1 and 2 were about awareness building and education and training. Year 3 is about next steps. It's about maintaining momentum, the here and the now, holding space, championing the cause, cultural change, allowing for the time that it's going to need to take to progress, and recognizing that it's a work in progress. And finally, as Nadine will discuss, it's about keeping the light on, and I'll leave that for her. Today's agenda is very full, so these remarks will be short, but you will hear about the importance of continuous improvement, bringing anti-racism into the culture of safety, specifically adding it to the focus on health and safety, and enshrining it in all we do across all departments in everyday life. I would like to thank the Anti-Racism Committee, Amina and Ahed, for their leadership, and thank all of today's speakers and panelists. For the land acknowledgement, we're going to do it a little bit differently, and we're going to expand it, and we're going to pull from some of the best practices at the City of Toronto, and I'm also going to personalize it. Paul Armstrong, who leads Mohawk College and is a fellow board member at Skills Ontario, challenged the board to not only do a land acknowledgement, but do one that is a little bit more personal and meaningful, just to show a bit of a connection and more than just saying the words. So we'll start first with an acknowledgement that comes from the City of Toronto. So, though I am not a person of African descent, I am committed to continually acting in support of and in solidarity with Black communities seeking freedom and reparative justice in light of the history and ongoing legacy of slavery that continues to impact Black communities in Canada. As part of this commitment, I would also like to acknowledge that not all people came to these lands as migrants and settlers. Specifically, I wish to acknowledge those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. In support of RESCON's ongoing efforts to confront anti-Black racism, I pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. And now for the First Nation land acknowledgement. So we respectfully acknowledge that we are situated on the traditional territories and treaty lands, in particular those of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, as well as the Anishinaabe of the Williams Treaty First Nation, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis Nation. As RESCON's office is located in Vaughan, we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work in this territory. In addition, I'm a Vaughan resident and I have 2 small kids, and we often frequent the Courtright Center in Woodbridge. That place is very close to the shores of the Humber River. The Humber River has always been important to the Toronto area, regardless of who inhabited the area or what time period. Traditionally, Humber was a transit route for First Nations and the site of many settlements. It's also where we spent time with my kids, and they've learned a lot about maple syrup. And so the First Nations word for maple syrup is Sinza Buckwood, and it's the Algonquin name for maple syrup, and it means to be drawn from the wood. At the Courtright Center, you can learn about the history and traditional ways in which maple syrup was made. And I encourage, through kind of this personal acknowledgement, for people to connect with the First Nation communities in their community and acknowledge the role that First Nations have played in Canada's history. So with that, I think following the agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Amina Deb.
Super, thank you, Andrew. And I think with that personalization as well to the land acknowledgement, I think you're also the unofficial representative for tourism of the Courtright Center, potentially, or if you do a different little acknowledgement to a different place in Vaughan, yeah, I think you could potentially get yourself an unpaid gig to City of Vaughan Tourism or the Chamber of Commerce. But anyways, I am the chair of RESCON's Anti-Racism Roundtable. Many of the people here today as speakers or panelists, and I'm sure many of the people in the attendees are already familiar with the work of the roundtable, but I did want to provide a very brief overview of our efforts to date and kind of how we got here and what we're doing. And so I don't think it's any secret that there were horrendous incidents in the summer of 2020 on construction sites across the GTHA. RESCON, in addition to most of the members of the roundtable, as well as the unions that we work very closely with, immediately condemned the incidents and took a firm stance that RESCON and its members stand strongly against any act of racism and discrimination in the industry. Our executive board going forward made it a strategic priority, and we began planning a kickoff webinar and forming an industry roundtable, which is what we call the Anti-Racism Roundtable. And so the roundtable is split between 3 subcommittees or working groups. The first is the Training and Education Subcommittee, which is focused on removing barriers for people to get into the industry. We've launched a BIPOC Youth Advisory Committee, which is made up of youth in the industry, and they help us make sure that our efforts are well-informed and well-intentioned to the group that we are our key audience. We've become distributors of Build Forces training, and we're working on best practice in mentorship. We're looking more at mentorship and how to improve certain programs. Workplace policies is focused on training, data collection, and collective agreement language. We're building a continuous DEI improvement model. And then the third committee is marketing and communications, and that's focused around our communication strategy, our website. So how are we disseminating information to the public and to our members? And again, just leveraging the collective influence for the cause. And just as a breakdown of where we started and each year, kind of how our efforts have been focused. So the first year was kind of just creating a forum and a space for stakeholders and the construction industry to come together and address racism and discrimination. So that was the launch of the roundtable and the Care Hard Hat stickers. 2021 was focused on engaging with community to better inform future policies. So we had like I mentioned before, the BIPOC Youth Advisory Committee, and then the BIPOC in Construction campaign, where we interviewed and shared the stories of workers in construction from the BIPOC community. And then this year, we've been working with industry to create resources and improve our DEI efforts. So the best practice guide that we hope to come out with within the coming months, and surveying and data collection to kind of see where our members started and where they're going and how we can help them improve their efforts. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we're at over the last 2 or 3 years. And I will now introduce our keynote, MPP Graham McGregor, who is the MPP for Brampton North. He also serves as our parliamentary assistant at the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism. Graham is a passionate advocate and community organizer and was born and raised in Brampton. His deep appreciation for public service was instilled in him through his work with former members of Parliament. It was this motivation that has guided his career through various roles and responsibilities with the Ontario government, including at the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, Amina, for that introduction, and thank you to all the other members that are here and everybody watching on the webinar. My name is Graham McGregor, as Amina mentioned. I represent Brampton North, a riding I was recently elected to on June 2nd. So I'm 5 months into the job, off to a running start, and I also have the wonderful opportunity of serving as the parliamentary assistant for our Citizenship and Multiculturalism Minister, Michael Ford. I really want to thank you guys and thank everybody on the webinar today for allowing me to join the space with you and share just a brief message from our government. Quite frankly, as RESCON is, our our government's focused on building Ontario. We're committed to making Ontario a place where people want to live, work, and visit. The ministry that I serve in helps to lead anti-racism work across all sectors for a stronger province. We're actually home to the Anti-Racism Directorate, as well as the Black Youth Action Plan, which of course RESCON has contributed to in a major way, and as well as other programs that support Indigenous, Black, and other racialized communities. Through our work, we try to promote equity, address racism, discrimination, and hate, remove barriers to success, and create strong and vibrant communities. Our ministry is working on creating tools right now for organizations to remove barriers for racialized Ontarians and make sure that they have the same opportunities to succeed that anybody else in this province would have. And I know that working with partners like RESCON will be critical to our success. And quite frankly, I'd say as well, government can't do this work alone. We need strong industry partners like the folks here at RESCON to do that work as well. And RESCON has made it known for years that any form of racism, discrimination, or hate is unwelcome in the construction industry. For instance, as Amina pointed out, in June 2020, we saw an increase of sickening, disgusting displays of racism, particularly anti-Black racism on job sites. And RESCON called for a thorough investigation on the proliferation of hate and racist symbols in Toronto construction sites. You demanded accountability and safety for your workers. And in the space of 3 months, created and launched an anti-racism strategy for the industry at our very first Addressing Racism in Construction webinar in September 2020. I'm very happy to be here for the third annual. And I'm a big supporter of the idea that this is a conversation that's ongoing and something that we need to continue to do. And our government will speak on behalf of our premier and our minister and myself. We're very grateful for your leadership and your partnership. We know this is going to be more pivotal because we're going to be building more. It's anytime you hear us speak from the Ontario government, we're trying to address the housing supply gap with a lot of work we're doing, including our More Homes Built Faster Act. As we know, Ontarians are facing rising costs of living challenges and a shortage of homes. We got a strong mandate to help more Ontarians find a home that meets their needs and their budget. Everybody in Ontario should be able to find a home that is right for them, but too many people are struggling with that cost of living and with finding housing that meets their family's needs. We need more housing, and we need it yesterday. Never mind now, but we put a panel together of experts. They've estimated that we need 1.5 million more homes in the next 10 years. And of course, we're building all the infrastructure to support it as well. And this is going to mean, there's going to be some pushback. We're eyes wide open. One of the things our government's consistently done, and certainly I've been able to do in my kind of brief time here, is call out NIMBYism when we see it. We recognize that there's frankly a lot of veiled racism in NIMBY movements, and we need to call that out because we as a society in Ontario, we need to be welcoming to our new neighbors. We need to not tell people to move somewhere else. That's not the province that I want to live in. That's not the province we should have. And as we do that, we want to build more near transit so that it's accessible for people to move around. And we're doing everything we can to get shovels in the ground as quickly as possible. To quote a fellow, I'm sure everyone knows, Richard Lyle, president of RESCON, as he said, this will also mean that Ontario needs to increase skilled workers, including skilled immigrants into the province. And we're facing a labor shortage right now of nearly 400,000 people. A year ago, that was under 300,000. So that number is growing. And this decade, we estimate we're going to need 100,000 more construction workers to help deliver our infrastructure plans. Frankly, as we get those workers, a lot of those workers, we're hoping and we're working very hard will come from traditionally marginalized communities, but a lot more workers will also be coming from other places in the province. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that we're building a society, a warm, welcoming, inclusive society that welcomes diversity, celebrates diversity, and says we actually need more diversity, not less of it. And our government's very proud on saying that. We're trying to open up opportunities. I'll shout out Minister of Labor, Training, Immigration, Skills Development, a guy named Monty McNaughton, who you'll all well know, but recently announced that we're investing another $90 million in the Skills Development Fund. That's hoping to support training projects that allow upskilling for workers and job seekers, preparing them for meaningful careers in their communities. As part of that plan, the funding is open to anyone who is unemployed or underemployed, and is actually prioritizing people with prior involvement in the criminal justice system, and applications for projects addressing the labor shortage in some of our most critical sectors. You know, we're doing everything we can to set Ontario up for a construction boom, because we know we need it. We know that it's for too long, it's been too hard to build. Here in Ontario, we're short on highways, we're short on healthcare facilities, we're definitely short on houses, we're short on job sites. We're definitely short on skilled workers as well. And as that boom happens that we are working towards, that we're hoping to have, we need to make sure that there is absolutely zero tolerance for any form of racism in any workplace. And that all types of harassments are prohibited under the Ontario Human Rights Code. It doesn't matter what you look like, where you're from, who you love, how you choose to worship God. Everybody deserves the same respect, the same opportunities to succeed. And that's, we know that sometimes government, frankly, gets in the way of that. We're not immune to the idea or in disagreement that sometimes the Ontario government, quite frankly, is a barrier that gets in the way, and we're committed to not always being perfect. We certainly won't be, but you know, we want to move the ball forward as much as we can every step of the way, and we rely on partners like the folks here on this call, like the people that are watching on the webinar to tell us when we what we need to do and how we can do a better job. We know that 2/3 of recent migrants are in the core working age. We need skilled workers, the construction industry especially. I'm sure that's music to the ears of the other folks on the call. But that's why it's so critical that we remove any barriers that are in the way of creating a diverse and healthy workforce. We need to be as welcoming as possible. We need more diversity, not less. And I would just want to commend RESCON on your efforts to attract more Black, Indigenous, and racialized youth, especially your contributions, as mentioned, to Ontario's Black Youth Action Plan, as well as the campaign that you've led last November to align with National Skilled Trades and Technology Week. I'm here to say we have an opportunity right now to build a workforce of tomorrow, one that's talented, diverse, ready for the jobs ahead. And we all need to live, work, and raise a family in Ontario free from racism, discrimination, and hate. We all need to feel like we belong. So I guess I would wrap it up by saying thank you for allowing me to share the space with you here today. It's truly a great honor. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, everybody on this call, but everybody at the webinar, as leaders in your own communities and in your own space. You can certainly count on myself and Minister Michael Ford, who I represent, but also our Premier and our government to continue to listen and do our best to be a champion. And I would just ask that, you know, I realize we have powerful voices. It's new to me as being a newly elected member, but I would just ask, you know, certainly if there's any time where we're not using our voices loudly enough, because sometimes our leaders don't, that you let us know and you hold us accountable and you make sure that we're speaking up when we need to speak up. So thank you for letting me enjoy the space with you. I wish you all the best for the rest of the webinar. Once again, Graham McGregor, the MPP for Brampton North. Thank you very much.
Thank you, MPP Graham McGregor, for being with us today and for your commitment. We're looking forward to working together through this roundtable. Next, we have Bill Ferreira. Bill's the Executive Director of Build First Canada. He assumed the role in August 2017 after serving as Vice President of Government Relations and Public Affairs at the Canadian Construction Association. Bill was a senior policy advisor in a range of portfolios at the federal government, including citizenship and immigration, Environment Canada, international trade. Following his time in government, Bill joined a boutique government relations firm in Ottawa, focusing his expertise on the energy, transportation, and telecommunications sectors, and played a pivotal role as Director of Government Affairs at the Forest Products Association of Canada. Bill, we're happy to have you here with us, and we're looking forward to your presentation on Built Forest DI modules.
Okay. Thank you again for inviting me. I'll try and keep this brief, and if there is any time, I'll deal with any questions that might come up. I just need to share my screen, so I'm going to try and do that right now. I believe you can all see that now.
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay, well, that wasn't brilliant.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, good. So let me just make this screen. Okay, so this is an important issue, obviously, for not only Built Forest, but for the construction sector, because as was just mentioned, the construction sector is growing, and the demands for labor in the next 10 to 15 years are going to be incredibly high. And that, for a lot of construction employers, not only is it the right thing to do to diversify your workforce, but it's a necessity because it's the only way that we're going to keep pace with, frankly, the demands of the construction industry. So, and this is, again, just really the challenge that we're facing right now. We have aging demographics, and we have growing demand. And the construction sector has been getting older for some time. And the share of young people coming into the industry has been declining as a share of the overall population. So the competition for younger workers is going to intensify in the years to come. And we're going to be seeing a continuation of the baby boom generation exiting the workforce. Recruitment and retention is going to be incredibly important for the construction sector, particularly when it comes to younger workers, because the competition for these workers is going to be so high. And what we know from our consultations and the development of some of our training tools is that, frankly, younger workers don't have the same appetite for discrimination and kind of workplace harassment and bullying that past generations did. Past generations would often kind of turn a blind eye or accept. Young people won't, and they will leave, and they will tell their friends. So if we in the construction industry want to remain an employer of choice for young people, we have to address this issue. This is not something that can be tolerated or that can be swept under the rug. This is something that has to be tackled, because it's critically important to maintaining that labor force flexibility going forward, because again, the competition is going to be incredibly intense. When we look at what we are seeing just in the Greater Toronto area alone, we know that roughly the workforce was about 166,000 in 2021. And over the next 10 years, and this is before we add in some of those investments that we are now seeing on the part of government and trying to meet some of those targets that government has for doubling the number of new homes being built over the next 10 years. So this excludes that. We were already anticipating that the labor force over the next 10 years had to grow to about 176,000, just under 177,000. The reason I've got demand growth at minus 10,000 is that is going to eat into the 2021 labor force. Retirements is going to reduce that by a further 26,000. So the total hiring requirement for the industry between now and 2027 to get to that 176,000 workforce is approximately 37,000 workers need to be found. In that period, we expect about just under 20,000 new entrant workers to come into the industry. And that includes some of the effort, frankly, and outcomes from some of the increased promotion we've been seeing. But even with that figure, we're still expecting the industry will probably be short about 17,000 workers if we can't increase recruitment significantly. And when we look at some of the other demands that are going to be competing against the residential construction sector, we've got climate change targets that have been set by the federal government. The federal RBC estimated that we're going to need to see about a $5.4 billion annual investment increase in annual investment on the part of everyone, frankly, to meet our 2050 targets. So that is an additional 5.4 billion being layered on top of the already existing high demands. The federal emission targets would like to see a 75%, or like to see 75% of domestic floor spaces net zero by 2030. That is going to require significant investment and renovation work to achieve that target. Federal budget also allocated 4.4 billion to support energy efficiency and home use. So a lot of demand. We'll see just what the uptake is, but there's going to be certainly considerable demand from the renovation sector to try and get most of the existing homes to net zero. And obviously, Ontario is also tackling not only red tape to try and accelerate the pace at which we build new homes, but certainly trying to incentivize the creation and construction, or at least doubling of the number of new homes we build in the province. So all of this is going to contribute to demands above and beyond those demands that we are already seeing on the industry. And this is just to give you a sense of what we've been seeing, certainly this past year, which is that building permits are up across the board, and they're going to continue to rise, is certainly our expectation well into 2024. Success, again, will require the industry to expand its recruitment beyond traditional channels. It's the only way that we're going to be able to keep pace with the demands that are currently upon the construction industry. And that requires a variety of new approaches to recruitment. We're certainly going to have to continue to promote careers in the construction trades to younger Canadians. And we're going to continue to have to try and expand domestic recruitment. We're going to have to continue to enhance recruitment of workers that are displaced from other industries. And we're also going to have to expand our recruitment outside of the kind of traditional recruitment channels that the industry has relied on, to increase the number of women, Indigenous people, youth at risk, newcomers, and refugees working in the construction industry. And what this means for employers is that we're going to have to see more than just lip service from them when it comes to maintaining a diverse and respectful and inclusive workplace. Concrete actions need to be taken on the part of the employer. It has to be much like the same commitment we saw with respect to safety. It has to start at the very top, and everyone within the management chain has to take it seriously. And the only way they take it seriously is if the owners and senior managers take it seriously. And that's what we're going to have to see if we are going to continue to recruit, but more importantly, retain those individuals, particularly the younger workers, in our workforce, and not lose them to other industries if they feel that we haven't been able to achieve a respectful, inclusive workplace for them. And this is just to help illustrate part of the challenge that we face from a demographics perspective. If you look at the 1996 population shares, 20% of youth used to, or in 1996, approximately 20% of the country's population were made up of individuals that were 14 and under. And only 12% were made up of individuals that were 65 plus. If you fast forward to 2021, we're now looking at only 15.3% of the population is 14 and younger. 20% of the population is sitting currently between the ages of 50 and 64. If you advance 15 years, that those 14-year-old or 0 to 14-year-olds come into the labor force, they account for roughly about 15.5% of the overall workforce, and 20% of that workforce is going to disappear and move into retirement. So we've got a demographics problem, and it's very clear that we have to address this issue if we're going to remain competitive. And this is across the country. Now, domestic efforts will help, but this also points to the fact that we're going to have to draw on immigration to help backfill. When 20% of your workforce is going to retire, or 20% of the country is going to be approaching retirement or will be retired within the next 14 years, and there's only 15% to backfill for them, we've got a gap that needs to be filled. So, build force support tools. We sat down with industry and held a number of focus groups. Initially, our Respectful Workplaces online and self-assessment tools were developed to try and see if we couldn't help build some tools to encourage women or encourage employers to create a more respectful, inclusive workplace for women. What we heard from those focus groups from women is, don't treat us differently. But what we also realized is that many of the lessons that would apply to creating a more gender neutral workplace environment also apply to making to the creation of a more respectful, inclusive workplace for everyone. And that certainly from the younger individuals that we then worked with in helping to build out these tools, what we realized is that that's exactly what they want. They want to go to a workplace that is respectful of differences, tolerant of preferences, be they sexual, be they religious, be they a variety. What they want is basically a workplace environment that in which they feel comfortable, in which they will not be harassed, and in which they feel that if they do experience these incidents of harassment, bullying, etc., that there are mechanisms in place that they can take advantage of to try and get them corrected. So we developed two guides that are really directed for, particularly for smaller employers, but can be cribbed from to help build out the HR manuals for anyone in the industry. And so the first is really a legal framework, which was to help, again, augment your HR policies for smaller employers. And again, that builds on not only a variety of legal requirements that exist across the country to maintain a respectful, inclusive workplace, but also then we created an implementation guide to allow employers to take that and operationalize it, to put in place policies and procedures with their managers to create mechanisms by which individuals can feel comfortable reporting incidents where they have felt disrespected or bullied or harassed or frankly discriminated against. And then we also developed, and this is really primarily for individuals working on construction sites, we developed an online course. And the purpose of this online course is really to mirror some of the kind of worst case examples of harassment that might exist on a work site, and provide individuals taking the course with suggested corrective action. In some cases, it could be as benign as an older worker working with a younger worker that happens to be a female, not really understanding that it's inappropriate to call her sweetheart. Even though they may not mean anything by it, it's still demeaning, and the individual on the receiving end of that certainly would not welcome that kind of behavior. And then we go even further, and then we start dealing with incidents of cultural differences that may be experienced on a work site, and how individuals can better relate to each other, interact with each other to create essentially a teamwork or a sense of a team, and also create a more respectful workplace where differences are tolerated and in most cases welcomed, because the more diverse your team is, and this is certainly something that the research supports, the more diverse your team is, the more effective your team is, because it's not relying on kind of a monolithic view of the world. It actually encourages greater diversity and frankly, outside the box thinking, which is something that is certainly required on construction work sites, given that every project requires innovation and creativity to achieve it within budget. So these are the kinds of skills that, frankly, maintaining a respective, inclusive workplace actually foster. And then about 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, we decided, specifically related to some of the instances that had occurred in Toronto, to begin the development of a course directed primarily at managers so that they can get a better understanding of what we mean by systemic racism. And this course is designed not only to provide a lot of history and also provide employers with a variety of or provide employers with a better understanding of the origins of systemic racism, the roles that leaders can play in trying to tackle that, how to create diverse groups and teams within an organization, as well as tools and best practices that can be implemented to try and address the unconscious bias that often can have an impact on things like hiring, promotions, as well as inclusivity. So this was really developed as kind of a complement to the earlier Respectful Inclusive Workplaces tool or online course, which was really directed more for site supervisors and individuals working on construction sites. This one's really focused on management and to help management better understand not only what we mean by systemic racism, but to provide them with tools to try and tackle systemic racism and their own biases, try and minimize those. And again, we worked with a variety of stakeholders from the construction industry, drawn from a variety of different ethnicities and backgrounds to help build out this course. And I'll leave it at that and deal with any questions that anyone might have if we have the time. If not, then thank you very much for the opportunity.
If anyone has any questions, they could always put it in the chat or in the Q&A. And if any come through throughout the webinar for Bill related to his presentation, maybe there'll be some time at the end to address those.
I would like to mention just one thing. Chris was actually part of helping us develop the Respectful or Understanding Systemic Racism course, who is actually participating this afternoon.
That's great. Thank you very much, Bill. We'll be hearing from Chris in our panel discussion a little later. Thank you very much for that presentation. We highly recommend the DI modules to everybody. The RESCON staff, we've all taken it. We've all benefited from it a lot. And it truly does support everybody in all stages of DI, whether you're just starting or whether you've already been working on it. It's extremely informative. And everybody that's taken it so far, we've gotten great feedback from them. So once again, thank you very much, Bill, for being with us. Next, we have the Chief Prevention Officer, Dr. Joel Moody. Dr. Moody is undoubtedly a face and name in the construction industry that everybody's extremely familiar with. We've worked with Dr. Moody on various files, and we value our friendship with him and the Prevention Office very much. He has been a public health and occupational health and safety leader for over 17 years with experience working in various labor organizations throughout Ontario. He joined the ministry from the Electrical Safety Authority, where he held the role of Chief Public Safety Officer and Senior Director in Analytics. He has championed innovative approaches to harm reduction and regulatory oversight and made equity, diversity, and inclusion central to his leadership philosophy. We're always happy to have you with us, Dr. Moody. So without further ado, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. And once again, thank you for having me speak to such a great audience today. My fellow panelists, thank you very much. So I want to say good afternoon. Pleasure to be with you on this third annual event. And as we said earlier, this is an important topic that we must continue to talk about. I attended last year, and I was new to the role, so I just kind of stepped in. But over time, really have been impressed, really have had the opportunity to experience and learn more about the great work that RESCON is doing, and all of our other partners as well. Because within the construction sector, we've identified that we have some challenges, but I know that we're going to continue to combat those challenges of anti-Black racism in all forms. And I want to say that I'm continued to be impressed every day, because I'll be very clear, racism has no part within what we do. It has no part within our society. So it's very great to be here, and a pleasure to once again to hear MPP McGregor talk about many of the exciting initiatives that are taking place within the sector. As many of you know, this past June, we had an election, and the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development expanded, and we have a new name. And that new name, Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training and Skills Development, and that new word, immigration, so very important. And this is a change I think we're all proud of. Our deputy is proud, and of course I would be remiss if I say Minister McNaughton is not also proud of this course as well. So as we speak today about diversity, equity, inclusion, and I'll also add the word belonging. When we talk about immigration and its impact, it's a big part of that story. From my lens, when we talk about weaving diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging into health and safety, that is a very important factor about what we're trying to prevent. At the end of the day, we want to be able to prevent occupational illness, injury, disease, and fatality. So for example, how are we taking and bringing data, especially when we talk about the ethnicity, the race, the languages that are spoken within our workplaces? How can they help our ministry, as well as our other health and safety partners, in understanding the populations that we serve? And I'm very clear, we serve those populations, because we think about designing initiatives, we think about taking into account those inequalities that exist. And these past 2.5 years of being in this COVID pandemic have exacerbated what many communities have known for a long time, that these inequalities exist and they must be tackled. So what are we doing moving forward? Well, how do we challenge our funded partners to tackle these topics? I'm doing that, and especially the ministry, we are taking that initiative to task. So for example, we're currently reviewing the mandatory training program as part of the Joint Health and Safety Committee training. So this Joint Health and Safety Committee training is an integral part of our internal responsibility system because it has a direct relationship to health and safety in the workplace. So we're asking those questions about how best can we determine and build in a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging lens into that training. And so how can I get that feedback from our stakeholders? Please let me know. Another goal, as we always talk about, preventing injuries and deaths in the workplace, because in Ontario, the workplaces are unique. They're all unique. So the construction industry, for example, like many industries, are multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial. So we must continue to bring awareness to the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the construction sector, but across all workplaces in Ontario. Because it's not only the right and just thing to do, but there's a good business case to be made. And we've heard about some of those from our past presenters. Because it makes good business sense to also be more inclusive with your practices. The better an employer is better able to attract and retain that talent, the better they are going to be providing services and being successful. The more diverse a team is, we talk about ethnicity, but what's about diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of experience? the stronger and more competitive that team is. So I just want to say once again, thank you for inviting me to participate in this very, very important initiative. And I feel truly privileged to be part of the committee. And I look forward to making an impact and a difference in our workplaces. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
And I get the honor of thanking Dr. Moody. As you know, he's probably our most popular speaker here, and I think it's a well-deserved honor. I think you've done tremendous work at the CPO. It doesn't really matter the issue anymore. I think you just are synonymous with excellence at this point. And as far as being a steady resource to the industry, you've kind of set the bar. And so it doesn't matter if we're talking about health and safety, it doesn't matter if we're talking about COVID, it doesn't matter if we're talking about anti-racism. You've just, in your position, embraced construction, understood us, and helped us grow. And just thank you for today, and thank you for that in general. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Like I said, commitment, mine, the ministry, 100% behind you. Thank you.
And now we are going to move to a panel discussion. So I'm going to add a couple spotlights here and remove some other ones. So I think Jason and Chris, if you guys can turn your cameras on. Great, we'll add you in. Oop. I'm going to start again here. Perfect. Where did Chris go? There he is. Okay, so I'm going to add myself back in. Okay, and so we've got a panel today with the only thing you can say is with industry experts. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on introductions, but I will let you guys introduce yourselves as you kind of give an opening remark. Quickly though, Chris is the Vice President of the Carpenters. Jason is the Director of Government Relations and Communications with LiUNA Local 183. And Jeanette is the VP of People and Culture with Daniels. And so we'll go on my screen. Jason, you're first up on my screen. If you'd just like to say a couple words and introduce yourself.
Sorry, as Andrew mentioned, Jason Oddie, Director of Government Relations and Communications for LiUNA Local 183. Thanks for offering me the opportunity to speak and be a part of this panel. This is obviously a very important issue for LiUNA, specifically LiUNA Local 183. Diversity is embedded in what we do. Yeah, I'm looking forward to having a really frank and open discussion about what more we can do to move the needle on this issue. Sure.
Perfect. And next on my screen is Jeanette.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Jeanette. As Andrew said, I'm the Vice President of People and Culture.
Oh, somehow I think you got muted, Jeanette.
There we go. I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, so we got to People and Culture, but then we lost you.
Okay. I work for the Daniels Corporation. We are a builder developer.
Perfect. And then we'll go to Chris.
Hi, everyone. Hold on, let me get this thing here, get this thing going. Yes. Hi, everyone. Chris Campbell. I am the Vice President of Local 27 and the EDI representative of the province. Like Andrew said earlier, look, my council, my local unions in the province take this very seriously. And so they're, gradually moving the needles to make things better on the scale. So I'm happy to be here. This is our third annual event. And, at the end of our panel discussions, if the listeners, can get some really useful information from this, I'm happy to assist. Thanks.
That's fantastic. I think I'm gonna start where you just left off, Chris. So this isn't new. This is our third event, but it's not like racism started 3 years ago. And so I'm going to give everybody an opportunity, and I might put you on the spot first, Jason. Can you kind of summarize or highlight some of the actions that your organization has taken to combat racism in the last 2 years?
Yeah, sure. Specifically, I'll take the time to sort of walk folks through what we did at LiUNA. We launched the LiUNA Lead campaign, which is Laborers for Equity and Diversity. And that was a series of motions that were passed and that were passed at our provincial council. 183 has fully adopted those motions, and those motions were to look at this problem from inside and out, right? There are things that we can do within the organization to really make sure that when we bring new people into this industry, that they feel welcome. And so one of the things we're doing is we are doing mandatory DE&I training for all of our senior management teams, but we're also spreading that now down to our business reps, those people who are coming in contact with the members. And the next phase, as we kind of finally now can have group sessions, is we're talking about introducing that to our health and safety shop stewards, right? Because these are really what I call our site ambassadors. And it's important that they be aware of this issue, that people coming to this industry might not have the same experiences of them, but they deserve the equality of opportunity. And so at LiUNA Local 183, that's the, we are in the process now of really building out that campaign. We launched a very small video highlighting the LEAD campaign. That was on the International Day to End Racism back in March. And the purpose of that video was really to say to folks who are thinking of entering this industry that we want you. And that, yes, these fences that are here protecting these job sites do look like sometimes like barriers, but they're not. And that this industry wants you, you deserve to be here. And that, we are here to make sure that your experience is going to be a safe and prosperous one.
Yeah, and maybe we'll move to Jeanette. I know Daniel's really leaned in on this initiative when it really came to the front in construction 2 years ago. So Jeanette?
Yeah, so we've done several things on our end, internally and externally. And it was really based on what was happening in the industry at the time and the world. And it was based on our team members' feedback and really living into our values at Daniel's. So whatever we did, that we were very intentional and wanted to make sure that it was impactful and we weren't just checking a box. That was very important to us. And we wanted to make sure that our activities were woven into the fabric of our day-to-day, because otherwise it wouldn't stick, right? The change would just start and then stop. So we created a DE&I committee. So we have senior members of our leadership team on there, including our COO. And we have a good group of very passionate, hardworking team members. Darren Blackburn and Fatima Saya, they work tirelessly on that. I think those names might be familiar to you guys. And we recently included an Indigenous subcommittee to focus specifically on the Indigenous relationships and how we can incorporate belonging for Indigenous employees into our organization. We have education, honestly, at the foundation of all our initiatives, and it includes unconscious bias training, cultural competency training, and anti-racism training. There's also specific training for our leadership team, and that is around anti-racism, understanding your own biases, and around empathy and compassion, because without empathy and without understanding yourself, this isn't really going to go anywhere. It is just checking a box. We also do a DE&I newsletter that goes out regularly that focuses on an equity deserving group, and we're trying to amplify voices. That's the intention. There's also surveys that we do to get a baseline and then compare it to that. The last one we did was 2 years ago. We recently did a follow-up and the feedback was quite positive. So that was a good win for us. And we are doing our best to have open conversations around bias and race. And it's hard and uncomfortable, but we are trying to do that. We have open forums. What else can I tell you? In terms of our processes, because a lot of times when it comes to bias, we have our biases, they're our go-to, it's automatic for us. We don't even think about it. So if we put processes in place to catch those biases, we found that's really helpful. So when we're doing processes, communicating things, we're asking the right questions. Where is this coming from? Is this fair? Is it equitable? And then communicating that in a very transparent manner where we can. And also leaning on the health and safety side. I think it's very important, Bill was mentioning that accessing the Joint Health and Safety Committee is going to be a good tool for us. So we're looking to do that in 2023 so that, again, it becomes part of who we are as an organization and part of processes. We've also partnered with the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion for training in Indigenous works and Adam Right strategies for Indigenous assessments and cultural competencies as well.
Yeah, it sounds like that's quite a thorough kind of bottom up, but also top down, foundational, using education and training to kind of put it into every part of Daniels as an organization. So I think that's very impressive. Chris, we'll let you kind of end the thoughts on this point.
Okay, so what we've done over the past 2 years is similar to what the two other speakers mentioned. Whereas for us, we've had our executive or membership brought forward a charter of inclusive workplace, and like I always say, this is a chart stating explicitly where we're at as an organization, but this doesn't fix all our issues, but it let her members know, it let our leadership know, it let the local community know where we stand in terms of discrimination and racism, and going forward in a positive DEI direction. Now we've been doing a lot more since also, where we've adjusted our admission process to make it more fairer to folks from priority neighborhoods. We've done DEI training for staff and membership. We're working on a collaboration with the Canadian Standards Association, where this standard is to provide a structural systematic approach to embed DEI in the apprenticeship programs. This will be rolled out next year. We're also in the process also of with the government, where they're funding up to the point of $37 million an apprenticeship service program to support small and medium enterprise. We've assigned 2 young ladies to that program. And next things that we're doing is the UBC, the Canadian District, is developing a national EDI Awards of Excellence program. And this will be rolled out also next spring, where we acknowledge individuals and companies that have made a difference in the industry on their job site, contributing to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Next, we have quarterly equity, diversity, provincial meetings where you have leadership from the various union get together and share what they're doing in their local unions, their local areas. For instance, when we get together, what you're doing in Ottawa may be different from Thunder Bay, maybe different from Windsor, but by talking to each other and putting the information on the table, we're able to learn from each other and bounce information, then take that back to our local unions. Lastly, myself, I was a local area representative. I've been reassigned, and my part of my assignment is to promote the unions, the Black, Indigenous, people of color, women, and equity seeking groups, resolve issues of racism as requested by my local coordinators, be the point person for community benefits, and where necessary, possibly speak to the media on issues of racism and discrimination. That's in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that's it. And I think it's important to note, from a process point of view or a high level point of view, we've got 3 organizations that are going down the same road in different ways, right? And so it seems like ensuring that everybody in the organization is part of this is a key priority and kind of a key to success. Almost constant communication to understand that you're getting it right, but that, the tops, speaking to the entry level and vice versa. Also, it seems to be there's a significant recognition that, unlike getting a working at heights certificate, this is not a box to check, right? And so I guess on that point, What are the current major issues, challenges related to racism today from your point of view? I might go back to you, Chris, to start this one.
Okay, so current major issues, there are quite a few issues, and I'm going to be honest, there are days when I don't have the answer to all of them, but
yeah, maybe the top one or two.
Okay, so the top one or two is cultural. Sometimes folks, sometimes if we individuals or my analyzing this is sometimes folks we need to step back a little bit and think about the idea that is it a cultural issue or a race issue, because like you and I know not every, there are bad apples out there. Most people don't get up and go to work with the intention of being racist or being a bad person, right? So it takes time sometimes for individuals to adjust to working with people from other cultures and other groups. You have also biases. We all have biases because we all see life through different lenses, right? And so those are some of the things that as representatives, as leaders, we have to take a second look at and see the best way to resolve issues as opposed to just always come down with a heavy hand. Another point I was thinking about earlier is
yeah, I might get you to say it because I think you had two really good ones. So between bias and human nature, I think both of those play in. I'm going to come back on some strategic stuff in a bit, but I'm going to go to Jeanette now. Is there a theme that you can add or something that's sticking out to you, Jeanette?
I'd have to 100% agree with Chris. It's that bias. Because a lot of times people will say, well, I'm not biased, because they associate bias with racism. So they're saying, I'm not racist, right? And so when you're denying that you have biases, because we all do, it's the way our brains work, I have them, you have them. But if you can't get over that hump, saying that, yes, we all have biases, I have biases, then you're stuck there, because then you're not able to acknowledge them and then work on them. So sometimes people just get stuck at that bias piece and they're like, no, I'm better than the average. I don't have biases. That's a huge challenge for us. Another piece is having uncomfortable and hard conversations, because it is uncomfortable. It is hard. We don't have the right skills, all of us, right? And so if you're at your organization and you see something and you want to say something, or you want to bring up the topic because your organization's not dealing with race and equity and inclusion, but it's so uncomfortable. Say you're a BIPOC female or you're BIPOC, you don't want to do that because it looks like it's very self-serving, right? Having those hard conversations is hard, and a lot of people just don't even want to go there.
Yeah, and I think there was a Nobel Prize winner in economics that did a lot of research on behavioral economics. And as you say, bias is built into humans. It's not something that you can choose to get rid of. It's just it's there. And so I think that's a very, very true point. I'll kind of end this topic with Jason. I don't know what's a major theme or issue that you're seeing today.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, one of the things that I worry about is, are we losing momentum? When when the George Floyd incident occurred, when we had the nooses on construction site, everybody stepped up. And I was really proud of how the industry responded. These groups and these sessions are critical in keeping that momentum up. But are people getting into this now? Are we reverting back to our mean? Are we going back to a time where this now is almost secondary, right? And how do we keep these conversations, as Jeanette mentioned, happening? How do we continue to move the puck forward? So some of the areas that I've been working on is trying to embed diversity, inclusion, and sensitivity around these issues into what we do, not just in an organization, but all the touch points that apprentices and journey people come into, right? So at STO, which is the new organization, diversity has been mandated as a sort of priority. So we're trying to get that, trying to build an infrastructure around that there. The other thing I will say is that our industry, I think, has a public perception problem. Data is critically important, but sometimes data can cause inaction. What I think we need to understand how the public perceives this industry, because if it is negatively perceived, our plans of attack might not actually be working. They might not actually be resonating with the people that we want to bring into this industry. So I think, one of the things that I've been talking about is having a very exhaustive and seminal piece of research around public opinion's views. I mean, it's focused obviously on construction, but it doesn't have to be. It can be about the skilled trades more generally and how people perceive them in terms of quality of opportunity, diversity, and inclusion. So, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest challenge, like from my perspective.
No, I think you touched on a lot. Just the idea that when this started and when the George Floyd incident happened and the nooses happened on site, special subcommittees were created. But you're right. The next step is, we actually don't want a special subcommittee. We want it in everything we do, right? Just, I guess, we had Dr. Jewel Moody, the Chief Prevention Officer. Health and safety is part of everything we do, or it should be. We got to do the same thing with our anti-racism activities. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk to you guys about strategy, but I'm going to combine it with a closing thought. And so I'm going to change what we had talked about and essentially say, I'd love for you to leave one thing with the panel today, because we are kind of pressing up against time. But if you can kind of combine it with, you said, Jason, how do we make sure that we don't lose momentum, right? And so kind of the question as you think about your closing thought here, and I'm going to give everybody 2 minutes, is what are your strategic, what's your strategic thought moving forward? Tell us something that worked, tell us something that didn't work. And this is kind of your chance to do a closing remark kind of at the same time. Like, what's one thing you want to leave the audience, you want the audience to take away from this presentation? And so I'm gonna start this one with Jeanette.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about momentum, and I'm hoping I could say 2 things that people could take away.
As long as it's 2 minutes.
So to keep the momentum going, that has honestly been a challenge for us. I think for everyone. I'm on a BNI lunch discussion, and it's not just us as a company, it's companies all across Canada that are losing momentum. And there's a small handful of people that are working tirelessly and they're getting tired. So for us, it's been working with other passionate people that keeps us going, sharing knowledge, sharing our wins, looking for where there are wins. That's been really helpful. And educating ourselves continually, see what's going on out in the world, where can we help? So that's in terms of momentum. And then the takeaway, what's 2 things I hope people can take away is take action, just some sort of action. Is it educating yourself? Is it looking at one of the playbooks BNI has, Build has? I know that RESCON is working on something. There's so many resources out there. Just start and then possibly create a plan, because once you have that plan in place, it's kind of easy to follow, right? So where do I want my organization to look like in a year from now? What do I need to do? And just start moving forward. The other piece,
I think that's a great point. Yeah, it's just start, because continuous improvement means it doesn't matter where you start. You just start, and then you're going to figure out where you can kind of go next. And I know I kind of cut you off there, but just to stay on schedule, I'm going to go to Chris next. So, strategic direction, a final thought, wrap it up for us here.
Strategic direction. Okay, we all know that 90% of the ICI work in Toronto is unionized, and probably close to that for high-rise residential and road infrastructure. So my final word, or one of my final word on this is look, the teachers, the guidance counselors, the principals should make more of an effort to connect directly with the union, because a large amount of the work, 90%, that's a lot of the work, is going union or is union. So why not connect directly instead of wait until once a year you have this group of young people coming in? Connect directly, build that relationship year round. Now, another point in terms of recruitment is, look, if we've been recruiting for some of our unions who have been around for over 100 years, if we recruit one way and it's not as effective, we should go a little bit further. Go into the local mosque, church, hair salon, community center, gathering spots on weekends, and go and talk to the folks, let them know directly, point to that subway station, that tower across the road. So here is an opportunity, find points that they can identify with and give them the information and encourage them, let them know that, look, the unions, the industry is more welcoming and we have more of an open door policy. Encourage them to come and get folks that reflect them. If you go, if it's a group of Hispanic folks, well, get some Hispanic people to go on. If it's workers of color, get them to go in. And so that's this way we can ensure that we have a diverse membership, we have a diverse or a more diverse workforce, go above and beyond what we've been doing all these years. That's my closing remark.
No, I think that's very inspiring and very wise. So Jason, you get the final thought.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're running out of time, but I did want to talk about two examples of where we failed. And I think it's important. We always talk about our successes, but I think it's important to talk about where the industry really dropped the ball. There's small examples, but there's stories that I hear continually. The first was a young woman, person of color, wanted to get into, she took our handyman course, she took our framing course, found out that she had a real particular skill on the handyman course, dovetailed that. We reached out, she couldn't get placed. We reached out, I made personal calls to several organizations, all in that business, and we failed her. And we created with that one example, a level of toxicity that will be spread amongst her friends, her community, that's going to be hard to counter. So we have to be mindful. I hear what Chris is saying about reaching out and talking about opportunities. We have to be able to deliver those opportunities. The second one, and this is a recurring theme that I'm hearing now from employers particularly, which is, it's not me, I want to hire, it's my people, they don't want to work with these. And I challenge them on that. And I think we have to push back on this strongly and to suggest that you have no problem reprimanding your employees if they're late, if they're performing their work poorly. But on something like this, all of a sudden they hold the day, they hold the cart. That's unacceptable. And we need to do more as an industry to say that, to support those people who are trying to get in this industry. If we don't, that's another failure point. That's somebody else who will counter all of our work that we're trying to do. And so it's important to have the successes. We've had so many amazing stories that we highlight, but I think it's opportunities like this that we should really talk about where it broke, where the system, where we failed, and how we can do better.
Yeah, I think that it needs to be talked about, right? We need to celebrate our leaders, and we need to go after the laggers. There's no other way to say it, right? I think your point there on if you get disciplined for one thing, then you need to be disciplined for this, right? It's what is acceptable, what isn't. Some of these conversations are positive, and some of them are calling it out. And I think we did hear that today on the panel. There's good things happening,
Andrew,
but there's a lot more that needs to be done.
There's no algorithm, to end this process, right? Like, this is something that takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of conversation. We're never going to find a code that solves it. And so it takes time, and we are going to have successes and we're going to have failures, but we cannot keep our head in the sand. We got to continue to look at all the options.
And I think we'll end it just on that point, because I think it was very well said. So thank you to Chris and Jeanette and Jason. Very, very thoughtful panel, and really appreciate your time. And more importantly, appreciate the efforts that you guys are all making in your day-to-day and the leadership roles that you guys are taking in the industry. So thank you very much for all of that. Now I have the opportunity, I got to get Nadine to turn on her camera here, but I have the opportunity of introducing Nadine. And so I am not going to read her bio, but I am going to say that one of the many benefits to the anti-racism efforts here at RESCON is I've gotten to know Nadine. And so I'll introduce her as a mother and a grandmother, as a business owner, as someone who came out of construction, as a poet, as an artist, as someone who understands what we do and is starting to help the industry understand the importance of what our actions are, has taught us words like companionship, and is going to teach us a little bit more today. And so I didn't read your official bio, Nadine, but you know, you're a very unique person, and I just didn't think it was right to do, you know, something that wasn't unique. So I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Andrew and team, not just at RESCON, but for everyone present here today. It gives me a great delight to join you guys here today on this bright, sunny afternoon here in Southern Ontario. I made sure I brought some color because I'm talking about light. So I'm going to share a piece of spoken word poetry that I have written specifically for the occasion, but I pride myself in being an authentic individual who puts myself out there and my story and stories that I've observed on this journey to give some insight and to help move this needle that we're all, I think it's safe to say that we're all interested in moving, right? So this piece, I called it Keep the Lights On. This is, and sorry, I'm reading it because I haven't had enough time to memorize it. This is an acknowledgement that it is not always easy to keep the light on. It can get expensive. Yes, it can. Just remember that keeping it off is more expensive over time. For things do come out of hiding in the dark and wreaks havoc, don't they? We have seen whole lives lost resultantly. Keep the light on. Long after the story is newsworthy, after the camera and mic's batteries have died, even if the whole block goes black, you stay in the light. Keep working into the wee hours past lights out. The past saw the world covered in darkness for over 400 years. Presently, huge swaths is still covertly covered. We cannot cower or relent, for it is light that permeates darkness. So do not make light of the necessity of this light. Keep the light on. Whether others follow or not, be the leader anyway. For we have not even scratched the surface of the systemic issues plaguing us, namely in this instance, anti-Black racism. It is embedded deep and will take deep dives to see clearly. This work cannot be done in darkness. Darkness must be adapted into cultures, like a child being adopted into a family, not an anomaly, part of the family, introduced as sons and daughters, like biology. Keep the light on. Better yet, be the light. Glow in and out of celebratory seasons. Be not bothered with popularity. Glow, not for acknowledgement or for that pat on the back. You know the one. Glow for change. Know that you and I are the change the world needs. That is the piece I wrote specifically for the occasion. And as I sat here and listened to the speakers and just reflected over my journey over the last, especially over the last, let's say the last year or so, I truly wanted I want to thank a few people. I want to thank RESCON for helping me to keep my light on. I want to thank Tridel. I want to thank the Daniel Corporation. And these are just to name a few of the individuals that come to, or the companies, sorry, that comes to mind right away, that have really stepped up and helped me to keep my light on. You know, as artists in this fight, in this work, I have to tell you, it does get really arduous. It becomes emotionally taxing, financially taxing, especially when you work on your own. It's fairly easy for me to walk away from this and get into corporate, but the necessity of this work, it is so necessary, and it is one I started to do that I would do without pay any day, but I've come to realize that money makes the world go round, let me tell you. And with that, and I'm gonna share with you guys something that happened to me in the summertime. And I put it to words. I'll tell you why I go so hard in these streets. In the 2 years I have lived on this street, I've watched Black families with young children move in and out like a revolving door. My new neighbor introduced himself one garbage day saying, "Hi, we live here now. Those other people, they were just our tenants. We are the owners. We live here now." Unbeknownst to him, my tenancy agreement was about to end. And to that end, when Peel Board paid me for the Black Flourishing series I presented to their board for Black History Month, I stepped out on a limb and bought a home. It closes in, approximately 10 months or so. So when you see me in these streets, know this: the revolving door for Black families need to stop. It is up to you and I. We can all bridge the gap to ensure that equitable access for Black people is top of mind, especially in this, the International Decade for People of African Descent. And I reflect on a conversation I was having with a principal at the end of the week last week. And she said to me, and I'm here in Northwest Brampton, she said to me, Nadine, when I shared that same experience with her, she said to me, what is it that we can do differently? You know, in this community, we'll start with like, at the beginning of the year, we'll start with like 690 Black families. And by the time the year ends, or as the year goes on, we'll only have like 630. Families keep moving. And it's simply because we don't own a lot of these homes that we see going up out here. So you and I, it's up to you and I to step to the plate. As Jason had mentioned, I caught wind of something Jason said in terms of, you know, the George Floyd era came in, and it's kind of going out, right? And so people might be putting this stuff on the back burner, but every day we are out here and we are still being affected. Our families are still being affected. So I'll stop there. I know we only have a few more minutes left. I thank you so much for your time. Thank you for providing this platform and for allowing me to use my voice to bring about using my own story to bring, you know, attention to some of the struggles we have out here. Thank you. Keep the light on, Amina.
Thank you, Nadine, for always providing meaningful spoken word and providing a creative medium for reflection about our efforts. If you're interested in more of the work that Nadine does and her artistry, we've shared her website in the chat, so be sure to check out some of her work. And that brings our third annual Addressing Racism in Construction webinar to a close. Special thanks to all the speakers and panelists today, many of which are also members of RESCON's Anti-Racism Roundtable. As with all of our webinars, this is recorded and we will be sharing the link with everyone who RSVP'd, and we'll also be posting it to our website, and that'll be out in the next couple of days. And if you haven't already, our next upcoming event is on November 21st from 1 to 2:30, and that is our 4th annual Mental Health and Addiction Symposium. And we'll also be sure to share the link to RSVP to that event when we send out the recording. And so thanks everyone for joining us today, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week.